Hey, everybody, I'm Brady Irwin, head coach here at Science of Speed. I'd like to thank you guys for joining in. And most importantly, I'd like to thank longtime friend and fellow coach Ryan Kohler to our training talks today. Ryan is the head coach and physiologist with Fast Talk Labs. I've had the privilege of knowing and working with Ryan for about the last 15 years here, both on a coaching side and also from a racing and cycling side of things. Ryan, I'd just like to say thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. I love your intro music, by the way. I was kind of dancing before we got into this.
We'll have to give that to Meg. Meg does all the back end work and honestly all the hard work. So yeah, thank you, Meg, for that. And today Ryan and I are going to delve into a lot of the nutrition side of things that we at Science of Speed, especially getting from the sounds of it, Ryan has had as well. Before Fast Talk Labs, Ryan has had done a lot of work on nutrition side, creating athlete nutrition plans for race day, and also whether it's weight loss or weight maintenance. And that's really where, he shows a lot of his expertise at, which is why we're bringing him in. So Ryan, let's just go ahead and dive into things if you're good with that.
Sounds good.
Perfect. All right. So over the last year or two, we've had a lot of our athletes who have, either experienced GI distress or have just seen a lot of product come to the market that is more of a liquid nutrition. We've kind of had mixed experiences with it, both good and bad. But Ryan, from your experience, what have you seen with this, and what are you finding, either the pros and the cons, or a little bit of both being with that?
Yeah, I mean, on the liquid nutrition strategy, I mean, I feel like it's come and gone over the years too. And the one thing that I've learned over the years that I'll start out with is there's a certain subset of athletes that just have this iron gut where they can tolerate basically anything. And I mean, they're the easy ones because it's just a fact of determining what they like, and then they just go and do it. So it's great. But I think a much larger subset of the athletes out there have to figure out, okay, what do I need to work with my GI system, really? So, depending if we're talking about all liquid nutrition, right, I think that really comes down to the type of race, the conditions, the length of time we'll be out there. For what I generally start with athletes is looking at upwards of 4 to 5 hours, we can pretty much fake our way through with any kind of nutrition.
Right.
So if somebody wants to do 100% liquid nutrition, I think that's completely acceptable and might work fairly well. Once we start to get beyond that 5 hour mark and we start to think about more 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, thinking like, iron distance, 100-mile races, things like that, where we'll be out there for a while. That's where I start to shift less and less to focusing on more liquid. And we start to pull these apart and say, all right, where's the liquid? How much is coming in? And then how much do you have that solid fuel as well?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, where I've seen it in the past for a lot of people is, especially with, they train in one climate and race in the other, or you have that weird race of the year where it's, normally 85 degrees and now you're seeing 100-degree heat indices. How have you found, I guess, a solution for adjusting nutrition and compensating for that, since now they still need the same caloric need, but, it might be that now they need more fluid because sweat rate is higher and so on?
Yeah. When we talk about environmental conditions, then we need to think about, just the amount of fluid coming in for one, but then with the liquid nutrition, that's where we may need to adjust the carbohydrate concentration a little bit too. The first couple of minutes of exercise, 80% of the blood flow is diverted from the gut to go to the muscles so that we can work. So we really need to figure out, okay, well, how hot is it going to be? Are we heat acclimated, and can we tolerate this? So for something in the heat, then we need to really tune up the amount of liquid coming in to a certain degree for people so that we can just get as close as possible to an ideal replacement. And then the other piece is, okay, well, now that it's hot and we're now challenging the gut even more, I really try to look at it as like, how much is the gut challenged, right? The physical piece, going out on the bike, going on the run, doing what we've trained ourselves to do is almost the easy part when race day comes. The other piece, that nutrition training, is, all right, how much can our gut tolerate, and what kind of challenges do we put in front of it? So yeah, if we're training in 60-degree weather and all of a sudden race day it's 90, well, now that's an added challenge to the gut. So that's where we need to consider the percentage of carbohydrate in the drink. So in some cases we may need to say, all right, let's slide it down, mix your drink a little bit lighter, so that we're at like 3% carbohydrate, not 4 or 5% carbohydrate, and focus on the fluid and the sodium coming in to help manage that hydration throughout. And yeah, we need to make those adjustments to say, okay, well, if we're now dialing back on the hydration, well, let's figure out some safe options for you to take in that are solid fuel. And the timing of that becomes important too, because now we're shifting how we get the fuel.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And you touched on it there briefly as well, but you dilute the drink mix or whatever it may be, excuse me, and then you're having to adjust sodium intake as well, because when you dilute that drink mix and you're diluting the carbohydrate side of things, you're also diluting the sodium side. So, at that point, are you putting more table salt into it? Or are you looking more to a secondary source like a S caps or whatever the pink salt is? I can't think of the name of it now. But something like that, or what approach would you say there?
Yeah, the sodium, it's tricky. There's I don't always slide it up for people just because it is hotter. We know that the body does a really good job of regulating sodium levels. So with that, what I'll do, and this is why nutrition training is always such a longer term approach, is we try to find initially, like I'll give it, 5, 6, 7 weeks with someone to kind of establish, okay, let's find your initial habits. Yeah. Then let's make a plan and have you start testing that. So if we find that someone is training in the heat and they're consuming X amount of fluid ounces per hour, and maybe they're getting 600 milligrams of sodium, in a bottle. What we'll do is say, okay, well, if it's hotter, we know we'll likely need a little bit more sodium. So we'll slide it up maybe a little bit, 700, not too much. But what I want to do is try to find that upper end with them. That's why we give this weeks to happen. We'll say, well, let's go in the upper end and say, some people, if they're taking like, any kind of caps or any additional sodium supplements, that can jack their sodium intake up well over a gram per liter or more. Right. So, but that's not always comfortable. So we want to kind of tune it up until we find this upper limit where it's either just doesn't taste as good or you're not drinking as much, and then bring it back down. So it is sort of an exploration over weeks to find what you can tolerate. Okay. And really, yeah, if you take too much sodium, it's either the nice thing about the sodium is if it's sodium chloride, you'll reach your top end very quick because of the flavors. It's like drinking seawater. Yeah. If we're doing like sodium citrate, then we can get a little bit more and you wouldn't notice it. But the worst case is you're just going to sweat it out. We take in more sodium, the body's going to regulate and just get rid of it anyway. So we don't have to be too strict, I guess, about the sodium.
Okay. So basically, if you're looking liquid nutrition, you have a super hot day, you're diluting the carbohydrate, therefore also diluting sodium intake. It might not be as big of a deal for some people.
Yeah. For some, maybe not. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So looking opposite spectrum of liquid, let's go solid food. Let's compare more real food or semi-solid as well. Yeah. Let's compare more your thoughts on real food versus gels or the chews or anything of that sort. Any preference or event specificity that you would recommend one of those over the other?
Yeah. So this is where I'll keep the length aspect of it, but we'll also talk about the course and the periodization of it within the course. Yeah. So the length, same thing. Couple hours if we go out, we can rely solely on gels for the most part. Completely fine. We won't likely get that GI distress. Right. The longer the event gets, then the more we start to focus on pulling apart the say gels. And I only focus on gels now because those are most likely the ones that will lead to some sort of GI distress because they're so easy to just put in there. But yeah, any of the engineered foods would fall into that category. So on the other side, we have the real food. So from a length standpoint, 4 or 5 hours, we can exist on pretty much engineered nutrition, gels, gummies, blocks, all that good stuff, because generally the race effort will be high enough where we just can't eat real food and it's going to take too much time. So we want to just put those quick things in. As we extend the duration, then we slide more into figuring out, okay, well now we can't have 5 hours of gels and then expect to have bars and sandwiches because we won't want anything sweet at that point.
Right.
So I think back from our early coaching days when everybody was doing Leadville was a perfect example because we know Leadville has there's very specific points on that course where you're going hard and then where other points where you're recovering. So that's where when I'm working with someone for say a 10-hour, 11-hour event, we look at the course and say, okay, when do you have the ability to digest a little bit more based on your intensity? And then when are you going hard? So then we'll start to say, all right, maybe your tolerance is 7 or 8 gels, and that's about all you can handle. Let's make sure that hour 11, you can still take a gel, and that might be number 7. But before that, we'll use gels and drinks on the climbs. You're going at sub-threshold, threshold. Let's go for the higher intensity and just quick things that can be digested fast. On the descents or flats, then that's a great place to eat something real. And then what we're doing is really pushing off this taste fatigue, because we get that point where the common feedback is, I just don't want anything sweet. I can't eat anything sweet. So that's that taste fatigue that creeps in. So that's where we talk about, all right, well, let's find those salty or savory flavors that you enjoy and intersperse them consistently so that you can still have sweet 7, 8, 9 hours later.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. So just to kind of summarize that one, it really depends on intensity. So crit races, road races, majority of those, unless you already have stomach issues, you're perfectly fine looking at more the, and the way I like the way you described it, the engineered foods. As you get into longer events, anything, would you say 5 hours and above as well, that's where you need to start reassessing, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to approach it with some solid food?
Yeah. That 5 hour is roughly somewhere in the 4 to 6 range, I say, but 5 is a great place where if it's an event longer than that, we need to talk about real food. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. So looking at food, endurance sports in general, whether it's somebody getting into it, right off the bat, somebody who's looking to get down to race weight. Weight is often one of those things that's commonly discussed. And I've seen it personally with a handful of athletes over this last 6 months. They're coming out of COVID and they have that COVID belly now, and they're wanting to lose a couple pounds. Well, they're modifying their diet, but not modifying training. What do you see as a good approach for endurance athletes who might not be racing right now, but are more looking to, lose a little bit of weight, but continue to improve fitness? Where's that kind of threshold that you find?
That threshold sometimes seems like a moving target.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really tough. If they're not racing, then I think that makes it a little bit easier. So I think about it in terms, there's 2 sort of phases. And I was just working with someone yesterday to start this process. It's an athlete that's doing the triple bypass he's got 14 weeks from now. So not a race, but an event that he wants to do well at, very similar, wants to improve fitness, but try to drop some weight so that he feels better on the climbs. So I think of it, again, long-term, all this nutrition stuff is always going to be don't wait 2 weeks out and then try to figure it out because it's too late. So we've got 14 weeks. So what we're going to do is break it up into 2 different phases. So this initial phase is what I would consider a more active weight loss phase. And that's where we would base, hopefully the training for an individual would be more maybe base focus, nothing too crazy. They're not building huge training volumes or doing big camps. And our focus, we can exist in a little bit of a deficit to help encourage that weight loss. So that's where we can create an energy deficit, focus more on the weight loss, and know that, we can do a base ride or an endurance ride. We can do that a little bit hungry. It's fine. We might fuel for any interval sessions we have, but in general, we can work through it. And for weight loss, we should find that there is a little bit of hunger with it. That's what's going to help drive that. So, but at a certain point, we need to transition to what I call more of like a passive weight loss focus, because now we're shifting to more performance mindset. So now whatever weight loss we get over however many weeks that is, for this person, it'll be, we're going to go like 6-7 weeks and cut it in half. And then whatever loss we get there, great. If it's 3 or 4 pounds, awesome. Then we're going to shift to a performance mindset where we say, well, anything else that comes off is going to be passive, because now we're shifting to fueling appropriately for your interval sessions and your longer rides so that you can feel good. So yeah, that's how I look at it, is really an active and passive. And then do we have enough time to accommodate both of those?
So what you're saying there is, when you switch into the passive phase, you're more focused on the fueling, both pre-workout and during workout, the recovery closer to the end of the workout or after the workout is over. And then it's in the off time, between that post-workout and next pre-workout phase, where there might be a caloric deficit, essentially.
Yeah, there might be. And if there's a deficit, then it's going to come from, so overall their fueling is going to be pretty consistent, but it's going to come from the workout. So by that point, hopefully their training load is increasing somewhat. They're doing some more focused, bigger rides maybe, and they might create like a 200 calorie deficit because they've just exercised a little longer or a little harder, because now their fitness is improving. So yeah, look at the deficit initially in that active phase is coming more from like the dieting side of it, where we're creating a caloric deficit on the intake. The passive side is more, hey, I'm exercising more and expending more kilojoules, but I'm not going to start overfueling. I'm just going to maintain and generally not be hungry. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Just a quick thing for everybody watching. If you have any questions right now, please feel free to ask them. We will have a brief Q&A session afterwards. But anything that you do ask right now, if we don't get to it today, we will respond to you with an answer to your question. So don't hesitate to throw those questions in here. Perfect, Ryan. Thanks so much for answering that. Final question that I have for you, and I know you and I have discussed this personally a handful of times on several different levels, but walk us through. I know you guys do it a fair amount, and you especially have done this a fair amount with athletes in the past. Walk us through a little bit of metabolic rate testing, and not necessarily just from like a resting metabolic rate standpoint, but also from a laboratory standpoint of, okay, how can we use this metabolic data to plan for our nutrition for our event, or plan for weight loss moving forward? Can you kind of give us a general understanding of that, or give the viewers a general understanding?
Yeah. I mean, starting with, I guess, the resting piece, that's going to be our foundation. So we're going to want to really, that what it's showing us is just how much does our body need to just survive, just function, just keep the heart beating, keep everything going. So that's always going to be our foundation. And then, when we build on top of that, the exercise piece, then what we can do with, and from testing, we're going to exercise you at different intensities. And the nice thing is we can kind of dial these in. If you have a specific pace that you're going to be going at, we can dial it in around that pace and then say, oh, you're burning X amount of calories per hour or per minute, however we want to look at it. But ultimately, then what we can do is really create this whole profile of, here's your baseline, and here's now at a low intensity, a moderate intensity, high intensity, what you're expending. So that not only gives us the ability to figure out from a day-to-day nutrition standpoint, how much should I be consuming, and we can even take it to, all right, well, day-to-day training, we know you're at 2,500 calories on a non-exercise day. And on an exercise day, when you do a recovery ride, you're at 27. Or on a day when you do a big base ride, you're at 32. So we can get a good sense for that. And that'll help drastically with planning, because then we know, well, these additional 500 calories or so are going to be expended during exercise. I'm going to replace a certain amount during that session. And, because I'm training and it's an endurance ride, it should probably come from mostly carbohydrate. So we can dial it in like that. And then as we get fitter, we can see, like we said before, as you improve that fitness, you're going to be able to do more work. You're going to expend more kilojoules, and we're going to see that caloric. So I think that goes back to the what's the saying? It never gets easier. You just
go faster. Yeah. So and you get to eat more, I guess. Is that the secondary aspect of that?
Yeah, that's the thing, really. So, and that's what I found as a common hurdle for a lot of athletes is, as they're improving fitness, then their nutrition is here, their fitness is trending up, and nutrition hangs, and it just hangs here. So then they get to a point where they've plateaued, and they're just like, I'm not recovering as well, I can't perform as well. And then most likely what happens, they're just like, they're low on energy, they're low on glycogen, and we just need to bring that nutrition up to meet their needs.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think that's a really important aspect of it is, as your fitness does improve, because of that, your caloric intake is going to have to improve because you're able to sustain a higher workload for a longer period of time. And with that workload, as we, kilojoules is king. Well, you're burning a certain number of kilojoules. Now you're burning more. So your caloric need also rises. So that's a great point.
yeah.
Just briefly here, and it's more out of curiosity. I know I've seen a pretty wide variance, but from the testing side of things versus, let's say, a head unit side of things, heart rate variability from a calories needed versus resting metabolic rate. Is there a range you've seen with that from what the head unit is saying versus what you see in the lab?
Oh yeah, you're saying based on like what our Garmin would say we burn.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like those have gotten a little better over the years, and they've come a little bit closer. I think, if we can measure, the oxygen you're consuming, we're going to get a nice representation there and tie that to heart rate. But it seems like those have been just kind of getting closer and closer with all the wearables that are out and how the technology is improving. I think it is getting tighter, which is nice.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I don't feel like the wearables and the devices necessarily are tracking well with our fitness, because we see some of like the VO2 max estimates, for example, are just off the chart. They make no sense. But that's where testing, again, like we put the mask on, we can test you at different intensities. If you feel like there's an improvement in fitness, well, you can easily recheck that and know exactly if you need to adjust, because the worst thing we can do as athletes is under fuel ourselves and then just exist in a state of low energy availability for too long. And then we kind of waste that valuable training time.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Ryan, anything else you want to add today?
Let's see. I don't think so. No, those are great topics, and fun to chat about.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for hopping on today, for adding your knowledge and insight for all the athletes that are joining in here. Yeah. It's always a pleasure to work with you and talk with you. And I just hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. For all those of you viewing in, if you still have questions, please add those into the comments. We will get back to you on those questions here as soon as we possibly can. But thank you guys for tuning in today. Hope you have a wonderful week and a great weekend of training. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.